Hey everybody, welcome to the Basis Points Podcast. I'm Kevin Flanagan, head of fixed income strategy at Wisdom Tree Asset Management. We're talking about municipals and relative value in U.S. fixed income this week. And certainly uncertainty is going to continue to hover over the money and bond markets in the months ahead. And the good news is that investors have been given a scenario where yield levels have returned to normal levels. And this development has provided a new landscape to consider when putting money to work in the U.S. fixed income arena. And in my opinion, one sector that currently offers relative value is the municipal bond market, the muni bond market. And let's first talk about relative value ratios. And typically when analyzing the muni market, one key gauge that is focused on is known as the relative value ratio. And it's simply the percentage of the yield offered on a muni security as compared to a U.S. Treasury, with the U.S. 10-year being the traditional comparison. And the general rule of thumb is that the higher this percentage is, the cheaper and better relative value will be for munis. And remember, this is before taxes are taken into consideration, and more on that aspect in a second. And what we can see is that when you look at relative ratios over the last nearly 2.5 years for the three key sectors of the muni market, AAA callable, AA, and single A revenue, you can see that ratios have been on the rise here in 2025. In other words, munis have underperformed the Treasury 10-year. And in terms of the ratios themselves, each one is about 10 percentage points above their average respective readings during this last 2.5 years. And in fact, as I'm talking to you today, municipals are the only major U.S. fixed income sector that has produced a negative return, about 1.1% so far here in 2025. And three things come to mind as for the reason behind this underperformance: increased supply, seasonal selling during tax season, and concerns about whether the big beautiful bill would change the federal tax-exempt status of munis. Now, the first two reasons tend to sort themselves out each year. But more importantly, the House-passed version of the big beautiful bill kept this tax-exempt status intact, and it's highly likely the final version of this bill will as well. So let's talk about TEY, taxable equivalent yield, for a minute. And what TEI enables investors to do is to compare yields on taxable and tax-exempt securities, and it represents the yield an investment in taxable bonds would have to earn in order to match, after federal income taxes, the yield available on an investment in tax-exempt muni bonds. Now, Wisdom Tree recently launched two muni funds: the Wisdom Tree Core Laddered Municipal Fund, the ticker there is WTMU, and the Wisdom Tree High Income Laddered Municipal Fund, the ticker there, WTMY. And they did this, or we did this, in conjunction with the industry experts Insight Investment. So as the title specifies, these two funds utilize the time-tested laddered approach to fixed income investing, and they are active solutions. So TEY for a fund is based on the fund's SEC 30-day yield and uses the highest marginal federal income tax rate. State and alternative minimum income taxes are excluded from the calculation, but what we can see is that the TEY for WTMU and WTMY are visibly above the U.S. investment grade fixed income universe. In other words, the ag, treasuries, mortgages, and investment grade corporates. And we're talking head and shoulders, really, anywhere from, say, 50 to perhaps more than 100 basis points. An investor would need to move strictly into all high yield corporates in order to find a higher yielding instrument. And in my opinion, the municipal market appears to be telling investors that besides the traditional tax advantage solution, munis could also be considered for broader fixed income portfolios. So that's it from me. Have a great rest of the week, everybody, and be well. And before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risk, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at wisdomtree.com/investments. Read it carefully.